together again. I supported President Obama because he spoke so beautifully. He promised change, but things changed for the worse. Obama started spending like our credit cards have no limit. His healthcare law made health insurance even more expensive. We've had stimulus and bailouts. Obama added almost $16,000 in debt for every American. How will my kids pay that off when they can't even find jobs? Now Obama wants more spending and taxes. That won't fix things. I had so many hopes. Cutting taxes and debt and creating jobs. That's the change we need. Tell President Obama to cut the job-killing debt and support the New Majority Agenda at newmajorityagenda.org.
From Iraq and Afghanistan, our brave warriors are coming home, wounded. Some with wounds you can see, some with wounds you can't see. Wounded Warrior Project was created to support our men and women coming off the battlefield. Please help carry these warriors the rest of the way home. Get involved at woundedwarriorproject.org.
Welcome back to the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the CB Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Thanks for joining us here again tonight. It's been, thus far, all the president all the time this evening. It's taken us a while to get through all 23 of his executive actions. Excuse me. And as I mentioned, this is a problem on so many levels. But let's shift gears here ever so slightly. A great article in the Wall Street Journal this morning from Richard Vedder. Richard Vedder is a professor emeritus of economics at Ohio University and an adjunct scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. The article is entitled "The Wages of Unemployment." And it provides a instructive and very interesting perspective on why we find ourselves where we are economically, with the expectation that so many things are supposedly getting better. Economy is rebounding. Unemployment is coming down, albeit very, very slowly. But to the article. From the mid-17th century to the late 20th century, the American economy grew roughly 3.5% per year. That growth rate has since declined significantly. When the final figures are in for 2012, the annual rate of real output growth for the first dozen years of this century is likely to be about 1.81%. What accounts for the slowdown? An important part of the answer is simple. Americans aren't working as much today. And this trend reflects more than the recession and a sluggish economy of the past few years. The national income accounts suggest that about 70% of U.S. output is attributable to the labor of human beings. Now think about that. 70% of income is attributable to the labor of human beings. Yet there has been a decline in the proportion of working-age Americans who are employed. So what does that mean? If there are fewer Americans who are employed, less of the income, which 75% of it is attributable to human labor, there'll be less labor, thus less income. In recent decades, there was a steady rise in the employment-to-population ratio. For every 100 working-age Americans, there were 8 more workers in 2000 than in 1980. The increase entirely reflects higher female participation in the labor force. Yet in the years since 2000, more than 2/3 of that increase in working-age population employed was erased. Now, I will point out, since 2000, this isn't all on Obama's watch. The decrease matters more than you may suppose. If today the country had the same proportion of persons of working age employed as it did in 2000, the U.S. would have almost 14 million more people contributing to the economy. Think about that. 14 million more people buying, consuming, paying taxes, available to work. Even assuming that these additional workers would be 25% less productive on average than the existing labor force, U.S. gross domestic product would still be more than 5% higher, or roughly $800 billion, or about $2,600 more per person, than it actually is. The annual growth rate of GDP would be more like 2.2% and not 1.81. Still below the traditional average of roughly 3.5% a year. The retreat from working, in short, has had a real impact. So, there's a saying in the industry that I'm in, doesn't matter what you measure if what you measure doesn't matter. The unemployment rate is not the statistic about the labor force that matters most. Is it a factor? Yes. Is it something that should be measured? Yes. But it doesn't tell the whole picture. And in this case, the percent of working age population participating in the economy is having a real impact. Why are Americans working less? While there are a number of factors, the phenomena is due mainly to a variety of public policies that have reduced the incentives to be employed. Now, we may be focused on, the president is focused rather on increasing the incentives for people to share information, but we've reduced the incentives to be employed. And the phenomenon that we face is due mainly to a variety of public policy prescriptions. These policies include, no great surprise at the top of the list, drum roll please, food stamps. Above all else, people work to eat. If the government provides food, then the imperative to work is severely reduced. Since the food stamp program's beginning in the 1960s, it has grown considerably, but especially so in the 21st century. That would be since the year 2000. There are over 30 million more Americans receiving food stamps today than in 2000. The sharp rise in food stamp beneficiaries predated the financial crisis of 2008. From 2000 to 2007, the number of beneficiaries rose from 17.1 million, that would be at the end of the Clinton administration and start of the George W. Bush administration, to 26.3 at the end of the Bush administration, according to the Department of Agriculture. But that number has leaped to 47.5 million in October 2012. And the average benefit per person jumped in 2009 from $102 to $125 per month. To be sure, we would expect the number of people on food stamps to increase with rising unemployment, poverty, and falling incomes in the late 2008, extending into 2009, and perhaps even into 2010, even though the recession was officially over in late 2009. But more is going on here. Compare 2010 with October 2012, the last month for which food stamp data have been reported. The unemployment rate fell to 7.8% from 9.6%, a nearly 2-point drop. And real GDP was rising steadily, if not vigorously. Food stamp usage should have peaked and probably even begun to decline. Yet the number of recipients rose by 7,223,000. So unemployment dropped, food stamp usage increased. In a period of falling unemployment and rising output, the number of food stamp recipients grew nearly 10,000 a day. Congress should find out why. Number 2, Social Security disability payments. The health of Americans has improved, and the decline in the number of relatively dangerous industrial production and mining jobs should have led to a smaller proportion of Americans unable to work because of disability. Yet the opposite is the case. Barely 3 million Americans received work-related disability checks from Social Security in 1990, a number that had changed only modestly in the preceding decade or two. Since then, the number of people drawing disability checks has soared, passing 5 million by 2000, 6.5 million by 2005, and rising to nearly 8.6 million today. In a series of papers, David Artur of MIT has shown that the disability program is ineffective, inefficient, and growing at an unsustainable rate. And I think Mr. Artur can probably make a broad sweeping statement about damn near every government program. News media have also reported cases of rampant fraud in Social Security disability payments. Next up, the president will love this, Pell Grants. People paying people to go to college instead of to work is traditionally justified on the grounds that higher education builds human capital that is vital for the country's economic future. But a study Christopher Denhart, Jonathan Robe, and Mr. Vetter did for the Center for College Affordability and Productivity, soon to be released, shows that nearly half of four-year college graduates today work in jobs that the Labor Department has determined do not require a college degree. For example, over 1 million retail salespersons and 115,000 janitors and cleaners are college graduates. And I bet they feel good about themselves too. In 2000, fewer than 3.9 million young men and women received Pell Grant awards to attend college. The number rose 1/3 to 5.2 million by 2005 and increased 1 million more by 2008. In the next 3 years, however, the number grew over 50% to an estimated $9.7 million. That is nearly 6 million more than a decade earlier. The result is fewer people in the workforce. Meanwhile, the mismatch grows between the number of college graduates and the jobs that require a college education. Lastly, extended unemployment benefits. Since the 1930s, the unemployment insurance system has been designed to lend a short-term temporary helping hand to folks losing their jobs, allowing them some breathing room to look for a new position. Yet the traditional 26-week benefit has been continuously extended over the past 4 years, and now many persons out of work a year or more are still receiving benefits. True enough, the economy isn't growing very much, but if you pay people to stay home, many will do so rather than seek employment or accept jobs that the pay doesn't meet their expectations. These government programs are not the only players in this game. For example, a more worker-oriented